Hi, this is Aaron with iBoard Repair, and today I'm working on an iPhone 13 Pro that's in here for data recovery. It was reported as being dropped just 3 feet and then it stopped working. And I've already taken off the screen to this phone and I've done my first diagnostic step, which is to examine the motherboard and use my DC power supply to see what the amp draw tells me. When I touch my probes to the battery connector, I see a pretty common problem. I see an immediate amp draw before I press the power button. So this tells me there is a mainline type short on here, so like VDD main or VDD boost or a line similar to that. So I'll take this motherboard out of the housing and we'll continue to diagnose it. So if I open my 13 Pro board view software, I need to find VDD main and I can measure the line directly to see if it's short. I know there's a lot of main around PMIC, so that found it. Easiest spot to measure on the top board will probably be, well, I can measure on the bottom board right here. So let's measure here. Okay, these were main. This should be ground. And main is not short. So if it's not main, it's usually boost. So let's check that line next. So the 13 Pro still has no net names. I don't know if we get net names for it ever at this point, so it's kind of hard to figure things out sometimes. Identifying boost can be difficult, but there's a couple patterns that I know. One of them is the boost IC. If I can find that, I can find the boost line. And I know that IC because it has a certain pattern. I'll find it. So it's always by a coil. And it has main in one corner. And it's a 4x4. So this is probably it. This is probably boost. If this line goes through the coil and this line is main, then this is definitely the boost chip. And this is the boost line. So this line is probably the one that's short. So let's see if we can find a spot to measure this. There's one little tiny spot on the back. Let's try to measure that one. Looks like it's this one. So I'll scratch it to expose it first. And let's measure that with the multimeter and see if it's short. Apple is ground. And this line is also not short, so interesting. Two lines that are usually the culprit of the amp draw before prompt to boot are not the culprit in this case. Okay, at this point I think it's gonna make the most sense just to split this motherboard because I'll most likely have to do that either way. So once this is the right temperature, which I have it set to like 235, but I actually pull it at like 230 or 225. Once it's the right temp, I'll pull it apart and we can take a look at the inner components and see if we can find what line is actually shorted. And maybe I'll just use thermal cam on one of these lines to see where the heat's actually going. Okay, this should be almost about ready. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like it's ready to come up. So the first thing I should do is make sure the short is still on the board now that it's split, and it is. So I think it will be best to use my thermal cam now. Before that, I'll use freeze spray and let's just see if we can see heat going anywhere. So it does look like heat showing up on the other side of the board right here. Interesting. You know, the PMIC might actually be cracked. If we inject into main, let's see if we also get an amp draw or not. We do. So let's see if I just inject into main. Let's see what's getting hot. It looks like it's most likely going to be the PMIC. I just think it looks like there might be a tiny crack in it. It's hard to tell though. Yeah, so it's heating up right there real fast. So if I inject directly into main, my PMIC is getting hot right away. And it kind of looks like there might be a crack on it, and this was reported as having been dropped. It wasn't a severe drop, they said it was a small drop, but sometimes it doesn't matter. See this, it's hard to see, but there's kind of like a line in this. So that's fine. So this is a iPhone 13 Pro PMIC replacement. That's perfectly fine. I should have these chips in stock, and I can show you how I replace the PMIC of an iPhone 13 Pro. So I'll remove the underfill around the outside of the chip first. So I do need to be careful. Looks like I knocked off one capacitor, and most of these capacitors are just smoothing capacitors for main, and they can be knocked off, but these two in particular are for the crystal right here, so I need to make sure that's on there, otherwise this probably won't boot. And I like to use tweezers here to remove the PMIC. I'll just kind of get underneath it and pull it when it's ready. You'll see. And that makes for a clean removal. Even all the underfill stayed on the chip, which is way better, so I don't have to clean it off the board. So now I need to clean the pads. And then I'll measure main afterwards and make sure that the short has cleared. So now I can measure main again, and let's see if it's still short. Should be clear now. And we're clear. So now once I replace this chip, we should be good. I still do need to fix this capacitor though, so I'll do that first. Okay, so I just realized I don't actually have a replacement chip for this, but I do have a donor motherboard, and it's not really an ideal thing to do, but I can probably try to harvest this PMIC. And I wouldn't normally do this, but this is a rush job and I don't have that much time on it. So I guess that's what I'm doing. I'll try my best to like leave the underfill on the board rather than the chip this time. Let's see if I can make that happen while I harvest this. So I'll harvest this and reball it, and then I can place it on the board and we can see if the problem's solved. And this board, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be a lot more destructive around it just because I want to have the best angle possible when trying to pull this chip up, because I can't really, I can't damage this chip at all. Okay. If I kind of overheat it and I don't put much pressure on here, I can probably push this chip off without pulling all the underfill up with it. The only problem is I might kind of blow it away in that process. So I have to kind of try not to do that. I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to see what happens. So it is right here, and I left some of the underfill, but a lot of it's still on the chip, so it's going to be a bit hard to clean. But it should be usable. I think this will be easiest on a hot plate, so I'll try that. I'll try to put some low melt solder. I'll reflow some low melt solder onto here first, I think. I've never used these tweezers before, but I think they can handle this heat. I guess we'll see. I'm not sure. Pretty cool. They seem to be holding up. These are good for handling glass, it seems. It's still hard to break this underfill. It's a really tough underfill. Seems to be working well enough. I do have a knife tip soldering iron. I probably should have been trying to use that. It's probably going to work a little better. And there's a little bit left, so let's try to finish with that. Okay, well, that's tinned enough for a reball. Hopefully I didn't damage it. We'll see when I place it if the power rails turn on or not. I'll reball the chip now. Okay, I think it looks pretty good. I think it will be usable as long as none of the traces were scratched, which I don't think they were. So I'll place this on our board. Let's see if it works. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I think I'll just clean the board and let's test the DC power supply boot sequence. Okay, hopefully we see what looks like a normal boot up sequence. That looks good so far. Yeah, that looks like it's booting. So that's great. So PMIC replaced from a donor board. That kind of made me nervous because it's always hard to like harvest a PMIC. They're just such delicate chips and they have so much hard underfill. So I'm really glad that seems to have gone well so far. So yeah, I'll grab some parts and let's see if it's fully booting. Okay, I have my board, my charge port, my battery, and my screen. Those are the only parts the 13 Pro needs to pull data actually. Doesn't really need anything else. Doesn't need the bottom board, and it doesn't need the proximity sensor. Apple logo, good. It looks like it booted up. Touch is working. And we have access to the phone and we have access to the data. Good. I'm going to disconnect this for right now. So that was great. So yeah, I ran into a problem where I realized off camera that I didn't have the PMIC for this board. So I stepped away, but I decided to come back, and I just harvested a PMIC from one of my 13 Pro donor boards. I reballed it. I placed it on the data board that I was working on, and that fixed the problem. So pretty interesting case, and I'm glad I solved it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.